Hi guys, welcome back to Beginning Python. This is lesson 5. So before we get started, some quick review questions. So just make sure you can get the answer to these or just go over our previous lessons. So, how can I make a list containing numbers? How can I add the number 7 to the end of the list? How can you remove 7 from the list? And how can I have a list, or can I? Is it possible to have a list containing both strings and ints? So make sure you know the answers to those questions, otherwise you might need to go back and review some of our lessons. So today's agenda, what we're going to be covering is for loops, which are a different type of loop than while loops. We're going to learn about random, and we're going to start finishing our project or add these things to our project. We've already introduced it. So I want you guys to think about what is a for loop and how could it be different from a while loop. And basically, a for loop is a while loop, but better and easier to use. So a for loop, we use it to repeat a block X number of times, and the reason it's called a for loop is because we repeat it for some amount of time. That's why they're called for loops. Now, I want you guys to make sure you can describe a for loop in your own words. So you can go over this explanation again, just make sure you could explain it to someone if you needed to. So there's three actual main subtypes of for loops. So a for loop is a type of loop, and then there's three types of for loops. So in range, the syntax looks like this: for variable in range, and then the end, this is the amount of time you want, -1. So if I did for variable in range 5, it would repeat 4 times. So it would repeat, it would repeat 5 times, but it would start at 0. And for variable in range start comma end, basically starts, instead of at 0, it'll start at whatever you set, and then end -1. So that is in range. A few examples. So for variable in range 6, this prints variable, and so it'll basically print from 0 to 5. It won't print 6 because remember here it says end -1. For x in range 5 to 8, it'll print OK, so it'll print OK 3 times. So basically it's going to print 5 OK, 6 OK, and 7 OK, but not 8 OK. So even though you never see this counter in the print statement, it's basically still going through it. Here, for var in range 5 comma 10, we'll have print var +1, and try this yourself, or before you try it, try to guess what it'll give you. So what it should give you is printing from 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10, because even though this counter doesn't go to 10, you're adding 1, so it'll be 9 plus 1. So we want to use a loop to print out the numbers from 1 to 100, including 100. So this is basically the activity we did last time, but we're going to see how in range could be better, how for loops could help us do this easier than a while loop. And if you feel like you understand for loops better or pretty well, try finding multiple ways. There are at least 2, and then there are a few more difficult ones. So hopefully you went and did those, but our first one, and maybe the most basic, is just for x in range 100. And then we print x plus 1. And the reason we have to do x plus 1 is because it starts at 0, and we want to count from 1 to 100. So it'll be 1, or 0 plus 1, which is 100, or 1, and at the end it'll be 99 plus 1, which is 100. And here, for x in range 1, comma 101, the reason it's staggered is because we're printing x. So instead of the print statement being staggered by 1, basically, we have to stagger our condition. And the last one, so this option 1 and option 3 are kind of similar. For x in range starting from 0 to 100, we print x plus 1. So that's basically the same as option 1. It's just we have a starting condition. Even though they're the same, we're just specifying it should start at 0. The next one is in list. So the syntax is pretty similar to in range, but instead of parentheses, we have for variable in and then the name of your list. Here's the code, and then this basically just cycles through every index of the list and allows you to access each variable. So an example, instead of having to have a counter equals 0 and then have while counter less than my list length, or length of my list, you can just do for x in my list, and x is going to be equal to each element of the list, print x. So this is really simple, and it just prints 5, 4, 9, 10, 6. And here, for x in my list, print me. So I want you guys to think about what is this going to do? So we have O, P, and L, and we have for X, which is equal to each index in this list. So the first time it'll equal O, second time it'll equal P, and last time it'll equal L. But we have print equals print me. So what does that do? So for our activity, you should put your name, favorite color, and favorite food as strings in a single list, and then have a for loop that will print all of these. So go through the whole list and print them, but it'll have spaces in between each element. So you can't just print them, you want a space. So that should look something like this. So we have my attributes, so things you like, Jill, green, and pasta. We have a combine, and then for X in my attributes, combine equals combine plus X plus, and then this space. So basically what it does is it takes X, which is each element of this list, and then adds a space before and after. Adds a space, yeah, before and after, and also it adds everything you've added before. So if you print combine, you should get Jill green pasta, but with spaces in between. So if you don't understand the answer, you can try reviewing, or you can ask someone or go over the answer online. And then we have in string. So this is kind of like in list, but it goes through, instead of every element in a list, it goes through every character in a string. And again, just like lists, the index system starts from 0 and ends at 1 less than what the length looks like. So for X in hello, you could also treat hello here, the string, like a list where each element is each letter. So if you print X, it'll do print H and then E, L, L, O. And here, string equals this is great. For X in string, print 9. So what does this do? X is going to equal each character, so it'll loop that amount of times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then however many the space plus great is, it'll print 9. So what does that do? Does it print this is great? Does it print 9? Does it do THIS? Think about that. So another activity, we want you to type a word in with input, or we want you to take an input with the input, so have a message in the parentheses also, and store each letter into a list. So use either in list or in string, whichever one you think is the right answer, and then have generate a list based on what the string is. So you guys can pause and try that for a few minutes. Okay, so hopefully you were able to complete it. The answer should look something like this. So the list equals blank because we want it to be blank, and then word equals input. We're assigning whatever they input into this word variable. And then for the correct answer was to use for X in string. So for X in word variable, the list dot append. Remember, we're just adding it onto the end, X, which refers to whatever character you're currently at in the loop. So now I want you to think about and try to remember what the 3 types of loops are. So yeah, you can go back in the video if you can't remember, and then just try to remember what 3 types. So 2 of them are pretty similar, and then yeah. Okay, so now we're going to move on from loops. By the way, the answer for that was for in range, in list, and in string. So we're learning about random, and basically random we can use to have a different output every time you run the program. So instead of saying x equals 5 and every time you run the program x will always equal 5 or whatever you change it to, we can use random to have it be a different number each time. So basically random is a module or library built into Python, but Python only gives us access to a few basic commands like print and list and stuff like that. To be able to use random functions, we have to import random. We're basically telling the computer, hey, I want to use the random functions, and then it'll give them to you. And we do that by having at the very beginning of your code, before anything else, you have import and then random. Or if you're trying to import a different module, you could just put that name here. And then once we do that, we can use the random functions. So the first one is going to be random.randrange start and end. That's kind of like in range for loops where we have start and end. It'll generate from those numbers, but it won't ever generate this last number. It'll only generate up to, but not including 3. So if we do 1 and 3, you might think it'll generate 1, 2, or 3, but it'll only generate 1 or 2. So this means the end number is exclusive, but the first number is inclusive, because the first one is included. It could generate 1, but the third one is exclusive. It could never generate 3. So now we're going to incorporate this into our project. So this project is going to be separate from our number counting game. It's just a way to show off random. So there's going to be 4 levels to this. You're just going to get through as many as you can or feel comfortable with. The first one is just going to be one game between 2 players. So 2 people say rock or paper or scissors. And then number 2 is going to have an infinite game where you count the score of each player and see who can eventually win. And 3 is going to be the best 2 out of 3. So the first person to win 2 games, basically. And 4, you're going to have it be a player versus a computer instead of a player versus a player. So just start off with number 1. If you feel like that's easy, you can go to the next one. Kind of treat it like a challenge problem. So if you feel ready, you can move on to the next one. So we're going to move on to level 1. That's going to look something like this. So you're going to start off with 2 input statements. So ask, hey, rock, paper, or scissors for player 1 and player 2. And then have if statements to compare who won. So if player 1 equals rock and player 2 equals paper, then paper won, so player 2 gets the point. So this you'll also have some time to work on next class. Goals 2, so just use a while loop to have it happen infinitely and also have a counter to check the score. This would actually be a case where you want the game to be infinite so that the user can end the game whenever they want. So this is okay to have an infinite loop. Level 3, have a while loop that checks if the player score is reached 2, so if it has, then you'll end the loop and someone will have won. And level 4, take out one player and instead of asking for an input, have it generate R, P, or S. You could do that by having it generate a random number, and that random number is going to be the index of a list. So if you have a list that has R, P, and S in it, or rock, paper, scissors, then you could generate between 0 and 2, and that you could just say get rock, paper, scissors list, and then add that in as the index. So if you're on level 4, here's a little bit more information. So again, we have to import random and then have a number. So ran equals random.ranrange. Like I explained, this will have 0, 1, or 2. And then, yeah, basically you can have a list to set 0 to rock, 1 to paper, and 2 to scissors. And here's step 5. You could incorporate random into the placeholder we did in step 2. And think, if we want our rand range to be exclusive, which it is, what should our start and end values be? Yeah, so for when you're working on your number guessing game, then yeah, how can we incorporate random into, because before you were just manually setting the number you had to guess, but that's not very fun because then you know the answer. But now we can actually have it be just a random number that you won't know beforehand. Alright, so yeah, if you have any questions, again, you can go to office hours here at this time, and it's always in your parents' emails.